Now, as you just explained, I'm a I'm a program manager at Microsoft, and I've been working on the developer tools of the Edge browser, which is the same developer tools as any other Chromium browser, any other Chromium product out there for the last 4 to 5 years. So what I wanted to do today is show you some of the tools and how you've been using them, and probably how you can do better at using them. So when they asked me to do that, I was starting at home and I was putting on the PowerPoint and I was starting to do screenshots and screencasts of things. And then I realized it's actually rather stupid to do that, because in essence what we have here is developer tools in the browser itself. So instead of doing a lot of screencasts and screenshots, I'm going to do it live in the browser. I was expecting more of a reaction on that, but okay. Okay. I mean, this is me doing live coding things. I didn't sacrifice anything to the coding gods, so anything might go wrong, but we will see what's going on there. So this is not a slide, but this is actually the website that you can play along with as well. So you can take a picture of that and you can see these things, and later on have all the links in one place. Because it always cracks me up. I've been a presenter for such a long time, and the first question is always from people, can we get the slides? Which is hilarious when your slides were just like butterflies and puppies and stuff, and nothing of any consequence. But the first thing people want is half the slides. So you have the slides now if you follow that computer barf thing QR code up there. So I'm Christian Heilmann, Principal Program Manager at Microsoft. You can reach me at christianheilmann.com. You can email me at gmail@christianheilmann.com. I'm in LinkedIn as christianheilmann.com, on Twitter at CodePoet, and on GitHub as CodePoet as well. So without further ado, I just want to get started on developer tools. The developer tools are actually shipped with every browser out there. Firefox has them, Safari has them, Chrome has them, Edge has them, and they're actually available by pressing F12, or if you're like me, I press Command-Shift-I to open them and go directly into the last tool that I had opened before. Now, there are 37 tools in there, all in all. For 15 years, random engineers thought there is a tool that I need and put it in there somewhere. And there's lots of panels, there's lots of submenus, there's lots of navigation going around. So you probably have no idea where all these things are. And you're in good company, because even the people who are building these things keep finding interesting new tools that we totally forgot about. So it was very much an engineering-led product that over the years more and more things got into it. I think one of my favorite bits when I started in the team like 4 years ago, I found that there was still a Web SQL console. Now, Web SQL has been deemed unusable and not to be used by the W3C in 2007. But there was still a tool in there for some reason, so we got rid of those things. And one of the best bits that you can do to an engineer is asking them to remove code that's not necessary anymore, and that's embarrassing, and that somebody kept using. And it's always good fun when I find something in there that is not to be used, or we can fold two tools into each other, and that way basically people can delete code. Deleting code that you don't want to see anymore is one of the best things you can do as a developer. Don't trust people saying writing code is a thing. Deleting code is much more fun, especially when it's other people's code, like Troy showed earlier. Now, the first bit that I want to explain to you is like, this is now the Edge one here, and we have a new mode here called the focus mode that allows you to actually only show one tool at a time. Because we found that when you open the developer tools in any other Chromium instance, you get all these panels and all these things at the same time, and most end users were confused about that. So here you can now go to Elements, you can go to Console, you can go to Sources, you can go to Network, or you can go to the Issues panel, and you don't get any of the other confusion in there. But the problem is that, of course, like people were saying, like, where is the other stuff? And that's why you always get these overview menus, these overflow menus with a ... in them. Playing around with those is great because you always find new functionality that way. But the real the real point that I want to make here is the command menu. If you want to be happy as a developer, get used to command menus. What the command menu is I go to the developer tools and I press Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P, and I get these text console here. And there I can type what I want to do, and everything in those developer tools is in there. So instead of having to know which panel has what and which subpanel and which submenu has that, you can just go there and turn things on and off. So for example, I can change the display to be a light mode just by typing light in there. And say like, okay, I want to switch to light theme. I want to prefer the color scheme light on the website and see what that looks like. And I can get rid of it by actually doing don't emulate anymore. So I type emulate in here. and then basically the color scheme is back to the normal one. If you wanted to find this one, you would have to go to the plus button here or to here and to more tools and find out where the rendering tool is, which probably you don't know where it is. But switching to light mode and switching to dark mode just with a command is much, much easier. So I can actually change the light theme of the developer tools as well if I want to be back in 1997 or something. Or I can go back to the dark theme again and see what it looks like. This is so much more powerful than anything you can do in those. So getting used to these command lines and also being able to run products from it. So you can actually delete that one here and you can actually see the files that are in this project at the moment. Or if you have snippets, you can do a command, an exclamation mark, and run the snippet from that command line as well. So this is something, the command menu makes you very, very happy. It's also in the browser, but it's broken on my machine right now. So you gotta trust me on that. But if you follow that link here, you can actually see the explainer that in the browser we have this thing now as well. So you can turn on tabs, you can actually move things around, you can change the theme of the browser with keyboard actions as well. And this is not only a thing for developers to make us more effective, but there's thousands and millions of users out there that cannot use a mouse. So we needed to make the developer tools accessible to keyboard users anyways. So we thought a command line is actually an even better way and a faster way for people to tab through menus and actually open submenus and close submenus with their keyboard. If you're on GitHub, you might have seen that as well. If you press Command K on GitHub, you get all the commands of GitHub itself as well. So a lot of websites do that Command K for like command palettes inside the product as well. Slack has it as well, I think Discord, but Discord has everything in one interface anyway, so it's really not surprising. But command palettes are a really good way to get you started as a developer in a much faster way. So they're everywhere really. That was the first point. Now, console. Everybody loves the console, and we love the console mostly for one thing, console log. Who here has not used console log for debugging? Okay, none of you is a liar, so that's good. I prefer breakpoint debugging. I'm sorry, I'm weird, but it's basically because I work on the product and I had to build the product with it. That's something to remember as well. The developer tools are written in TypeScript, CSS, and HTML. There's no C# involved, there's no Java involved, there's nothing involved that actually needs you to compile anything. These things are written in web technology, and I can show you later on an interesting trick how you can actually inspect that yourself. So we're building those things using the developer tools themselves. Is there an echo in here or is it just my ear? Okay. Okay, damn it. Okay, so the first thing in the console that people do is the console log. And that, of course, is hilarious because the web is full of all kind of stuff in there. If you want to make it more interesting, you can do %C, and you can style the thing then as well. So you can say it font size for 50 pixels, and then you make it much more interesting for your end users and also for your other people. You can also make it blink with animations or turn it around in 3D space if you wanted to do that. So that's one thing to do. One really interesting bit, and I probably should make that a bit bigger here, is the $sign or the bling. What the dollar is actually is a shortcut for query selector in the document. So if I know my keyboard here, I can say, for example, body, and that way I get a reference to the body in the document itself. I can also do a bit big. I can also get all the li elements with a bash with a bang here. So there I get 42 li elements, which is really not that useful, that kind of display. But both of those are really powerful to access parts of the document, to change parts of the document, and to write your own snippets to do kind of other things. Other bits in other shortcuts that we have is $_, for example, which gives you the last output. So if I do the $li here and I do a $_, I get the same result back. So often you do something in the console and you get a huge piece of code back, and you want to copy and paste that, and it's really hard with your mouse to work around in the console. You can just do that $ thing, and then you can see it again as well, instead of having to actually scroll up again and see where it started and see where it ends. One thing that a lot of people don't do right is if I have, for example, an X value here, which I do have as a global, because I'm going to show that to you later why that is. People do a console log X, which of course gives you the information, and that's cool. But if you do that with like 50,000 things in your code, and we all do it with 50,000 things in your code, you got random numbers in your console, and you actually don't know what is what any longer. The easiest and simplest way to work around that is put curly braces around the X. Because that way you get an object that says X is that one. So that way you don't have to actually write that string yourself, just put the curly braces around everything, and then you get that information directly in your console. Another thing that people don't do is that you also have different words. You can say console info. Not Ingo, that's a guy I know. Hello? And that one is just an info that shows the same way. It doesn't seem to make a difference, but it makes a difference up here when I actually want to filter by only info, only warnings, and only errors. So if you get too much information in your console, you can actually filter it by the type of logging. And if you use these different types, you can actually use the log for different ways to sort out that information and get only what you want to have. The warnings and others also have different designs. In Firefox especially, they got like little icons next to them. So I can do a console warning, and that would basically, console warn, not console warning. And that way I get this little exclamation mark next to it, and I know it's a warning. It's not just a normal thing. I can throw an error. I can do all kind of other things in there as well. But most importantly, using these different levels of logging allows you to filter them here by only the ones that you want to have, rather than like having all the noise that comes in. And on a live website, I mean, if you go to Twitter, it's basically an absolute mess in there. Like you open this one here, and the console will be like full of all kind of stuff. This is 63 times the same thing. So we actually sorted that for you already. So making sure that the console isn't as full as it used to be is a much, much better way that we helped you sort these things out. You can also filter it by things that you want to see. So you can say, go back to the other one that was based there, where you can say you only want to filter to the service, I don't know what the filtering is. Anyways, that's a different talk. So that's the console info warning message. Info table is something that not enough people use as well. I showed you earlier, if you go for the LIs and you got like 42 of them, the display is pretty much pointless. So it actually gives you like every single thing that the LI could have in alphabetical order. So what you can do instead is, if you want to log these kind of things, you can do a console table. Oh god, that new keyboard is so much better than the old one at the touch keyboard thing, the touch bar thing. Thank you, Apple. So now you got a table with all that information, which is again quite pointless because we don't actually know what's going on there. But you can put another attribute, another property in there, where you can say only give me the text content of the LI. Auto-completion does that lately to me. I don't know why. My fingers are fat or something. And, oh, what is it? Is it text content or is it content? Inner HTML. How about that? And you need to put it in quotes. Live coding is wonderful. So now you got a list of all the LIs and the inner HTML displayed here, and you only get the things that you really want to have. You can do that with other things as well, so you can actually get all the links in the document and only show the href. So I changed this from an LI to an A. I do here the href and the inner HTML. And then I got basically a table. This is a structured table, so you can actually copy and paste that into Word, into Excel, and all the other things that the people that make us do things use. And you can actually have the formatting stays the same way. So that's a pretty useful thing to actually show some data and inspect some data in the page. And I don't see people using console table enough. Console count is another one. You often want to find out how often something was called. So you do, what do? You do a var I in the global space, and then you an I++ and console log I or console log I++ in the function where you do it. But you can also use console count. So you do a count here, and that one will actually give you 1. Then you do console count several times, it counts it up. You can then also do a console reset count. Count reset. Yeah. And that actually sends it back to, and you should call it rather than just log it. And then when you do the count again, it's going to be back to 1. You can also give it a name, so you can do console count coffee. And then you know how many coffees you've been drinking. And if you then do the console count, it's going to be a default 1. So if everything worked out, that should still be the 1. So again, for debugging, I found that really interesting that you can give it a label and you can sort it that way, and you don't have to do that I++ and have another global variable that you probably forget about that can be overwritten later on and become a security issue. Grouping. I put a button in there because it's actually a lot of stuff to write. So when you have a lot of console log messages, you probably want to group them into different sections. So what you can do with group is you can, oh my god, that's bad. So you can say a console group collapsed, Heart of Gold crew in this case, or you have a console group, you start a console group with excellent animals. You do console log, console log, console log, and then you actually console group and excellent animals. And what you get in the console is this one here. You basically get a group that can be collapsed and expanded. And you can also have a group collapse out of from the beginning, and that one would show that only as a group. So if you have lots of data again to log for end users out there or for other developers out there, think about that group and group console, because it makes it much, much easier for people to get that information in there. One big thing that is really unknown and it fascinates me is copy. So I showed you earlier, if I stay, for example, I have a lot of data and I want to get all the links in here. Okay, that's not something that I wanted to show immediately. I get this lot of info in there, and I would love to highlight it and get this to copy. You can also use the copy command, and that one allows you to. Oh, I hate this keyboard. Yeah, it's German setting English keyboard, and sometimes randomly changing because it hates me. And so I can say copy A, and that way it's now in your copy, and you can copy and paste it that way. So any of the results that you get from something that you had before, you can use the copy command. So if you say, for example, why doesn't it clear it? Cool, my console's hanging. Okay, let's try that again. If I say, for example, I just want to have a reference on the body inner HTML, which would be a lot of stuff. $body inner HTML, which is a lot of stuff. I can do copy, and as we learned earlier, I can do $_, and that way I basically get the copy in my thing for copy and pasting, so I don't need to highlight anything in the console. So that's something that I found really, really useful if I just want to get some information out there, and also to give people snippets to copy and paste. So you can use the copy command anywhere in there when you're in the console. You can monitor events as well. So often you write an event to an event handler to find something out. So in this case, let's do an error again. Cool. I have a bug to file when I get back home. Yeah, I know. I'm good. I think. I'm not good, obviously, because you have to tell me what to do, but okay. So what you can do is called monitor events, and that one allows you to say, for example, I want on the body element I want on the body to know when a key is pressed. So in this case, document body. And then I say key press. And when I do that now, and I go to my document and I start pressing keys, I do a monitor thing here. You can do that with any form element or something like that. So rather than having to set an event handler and find out what the key press is, you can just do a monitor event. And if you want to get rid of it, you just do an unmonitor events document body key press and get rid of it as well. Because that's also another thing that is good to have. Because if you're confused about why your console keeps telling you things, it's probably because you still have one of those monitor events going on. This is another interesting way where you don't have to write some code inside your JavaScript to just debug things. You just want to see why something is not there. Is that event really fired? So monitor the event on that element rather than having 10,000 console logs in your function yourself. The last thing I want to show you is live expressions. One thing that a lot of people do wrong is actually flood the console with lots and lots of information. It slows down your computer, it uses a lot of memory, it's actually not that useful. So for example, if I have a mouse tracker here running, that actually shows me the mouse coordinates at the moment. And while I'm actually trying to find something out where my mouse is, I'm probably moving the mouse and the thing changes again and I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm flooding the console that way. So instead, what you can do, and a lot of people don't know what that is that the Eye of Sauron here, that little eye icon, if you put that one in there, you can write any expression in JavaScript and lock that on top of the console. So in this case, I can now just put a curly brace here with X and Y. And if I do that, then I get that information there all the time. So now I can actually just move the mouse around and I get the information here. I can still use the rest of the console like I want to, but this information stays here and stays sticky. So this is a really useful thing to just get some information while you're interacting with the document without actually having to scroll all the way up and down the console anymore. And it's not used by many people as well. And the good thing is it doesn't interfere with the rest of your code. You can do that on any website. So anything that is in the global scope or anything that can be read out by you, you can put a expression in there. So you can say, for example, a new expression could be document inner width. Window inner width. And I keep using that one to actually resize the window to a certain size when I do screencasts or something like that. So that way I can now see the change in here and I know exactly that's like 1,100 pixels now, or I'm too fast again. See, I could never do that with a console log. And I can't do it with that one either, so it's beautiful. But you know that the expressions are there for you to pin on top of the console and get this information there, and you have them until you press the X, and if you have the X, you get rid of those. So these are the things in the console. I've given an own talk just about the console. I've got an article on SidePoint as well. I love the console to bits because you can do so many cool things in there, and you can actually create all kind of really cool functionality that way. So that's console. The next one is device mode. Now, device mode and it's a tricky bit. You've seen it probably. You go here and you actually see your product in a responsive view. So you can resize the product without resizing the browser. This is normally how we use it to see if our breakpoints work and our responsive design really works the way it does. You can also actually define different phones here. You can look at what it looks like in an iPhone SE. You can see what it looks like in an iPad Air. You can see it like how it's in the Galaxy Fold or any of these other fold devices that's there. Technically, any mobile phone is foldable if you just put enough effort in, but it's just a really cool new thing. And they're really expensive, so it's really hard to test them. The big issue we have with that is that people expect them to do too much. All that does is resize the screen to the screen resolution of that device. We're not rendering an iPhone in there. It's still a Chromium under the hood here, or Blink, the rendering engine. In an iPhone, it would be Safari. So we actually, on a Windows machine, that wouldn't even be possible right now. But we're working on considering that actually if you switch to an iPhone, you actually get the rendering as Safari would do it, rather than as the browser that you're in right now. But this means that we have to ship every browser engine with our browser, which is a bit of a bigger installer, bigger download in the back end. But I think it's a very interesting idea to do there. Now, one thing that took me ages to find out, and it's embarrassing that it did, is that this gray thing up here is not just there for looks. It actually is different ways to resize that page. So you can say like, that's a large mobile, that's a medium mobile, that's a small mobile, and this is the full screen. So if you have a page that has query, no. Oh, it doesn't. Interesting. Okay, if you actually have media queries in your page, you can actually show them here as well. And Twitter, again, does things to me. And I don't have any of those in here. So you can test your media queries with a bar like that as well and click them and see each media query and see what your design would look like. So you don't even have to find that 400 pixel, 300 pixel kind of thing here. You can use that bar to just communicate with things. You can also show rulers. So if you want to do pixel perfect design, which you can't, but some people want to, then you can actually show the rulers and you can see like this is a 300 pixel here, this is a 200 pixel, and you can see the resizing, what's going on there. We don't have any draggable guides out there yet. That's something that I would want because that's what every other graphic software has, but we just have the rulers in here because that's all we gave you. You can also add your own device type. If you have a certain device that you know and you know the resolution, you can do that. You can also capture a screenshot and capture a full screenshot of the page. And you can close the developer tools for some reason. Why that button is in there, I don't know yet. You can also throttle the speed. So you can say like, I want this to be a mid-tier mobile or a low-end mobile, or I want to be offline, and see how your application works offline or on a slow connection. This is always a really good thing to see how resilient your app is. You see a lot of problems with a slow connection. How long does it take until users can interact with the thing? How long does it take before your spinner becomes really annoying and not as pretty as you think it does? And this is something that you can simulate here directly in that device mode as well. You can also do it in the network pane, but it's much easier here to do. And you can zoom in and out of those, and you can do all kind of other bits and bobs as well. Now, what we're thinking right now is that this is a tool that not necessarily only developers use. This is a tool that actually product managers, testers, anybody who actually wants to play with the web can actually benefit from. So we want to move that out of the developer tools and make that an own bar in the browser, and you don't have to have developer tools open to see that. So that's something that we're working on and researching right now with users. But Firefox has that, for example, already. But we also want to say like you could do a right click on the page and go into device mode like that, rather than going to developer tools and turn on device mode. Because on a mobile device, you can say request desktop side. On a desktop, you cannot say request mobile side. And that's in essence what that is. This is not only, I've been lying to you, and you should have called me out on that. This is not only resizing the screen to the screen of the mobile phone, but it also, as you can see, probably in that little round thing here, it emulates a touch interface as well. So all your mouse clicks and stuff don't work here, but it actually is like a mobile phone, like a touch interface. You don't have any force touches or long touches or whatever Apple invented last week and we haven't standardized yet, but you have basically a touch interface here. And you also have the user agent. And this is where it gets really interesting. We got a lot of complaints that we stopped supporting Instagram uploads, and I have no idea why that was. I get about 700 emails a day about people complaining about developer tools. 90% is garbage, 10% is something, and 1% is actionable. But a lot of people actually in markets where you have bad connectivity on your phone or it's really expensive on your phone, use the desktop to upload things to Instagram. Now, Instagram does not allow you to upload things on desktop, but it allows you to do on a mobile phone. So what they did is use developer tools to simulate a mobile phone to upload images to Instagram. And now Instagram detects developer tools for some reason and doesn't know what's going on there, and it's actually not working anymore. But we had lots of complaints why we stopped supporting that. We had no idea that that was something that we did. But apparently people use it that way. So it's actually really interesting how many times you can use that mobile view of websites to not get a lot of ads and get a lot of annoying pop-ups and a lot of stuff in there. Much like you got the immersive reader mode in the browser, or the simple mode, I think it's called, in Firefox. So sometimes turning that on, if a website is really super annoying, is also a thing that actually helps you to work on those. So device mode is something that definitely is an interesting bit to work with. We're going to come back later on there for Devtools for non-developers. Now, making external changes to a website is something that I found really, really useful, because oftentimes, and this is a great example, this is now a GitHub page. So I have my source code here in Visual Studio Code, and I would do the edits in there. And when I do these edits, then I have to go to GitHub and submit it. And then GitHub would have its page generation in the background running Jekyll doing the static page generation. And 5 minutes later, I realized I forgot a semicolon somewhere. So it's much, oftentimes, and more than often, I find having to debug a live website that I have no control over, that I cannot change around. So this is where developer tools are super interesting as well. So if I go to the Elements tool here, I can see the DOM of the page, and I can interact with it, and I can inspect everything as well. Really important thing as well here is that inspector button. This one is your best friend with anything that has like annoying pop-ups or something like that, because it does not trigger a rollover. It does not trigger an interaction of the mouse, but you can still see the information of the tool and pick it for the Elements tool as well. So you can also see that little info pop-up there, where it actually tells you the name of the element, it tells you the color, which font, which margin, which padding, which accessibility, what its role is, if it's keyboard accessible or if it's not keyboard accessible. So if I actually go into the link here instead of DLI, if I have a link here, it says me, okay, this is keyboard accessible, the color is okay, and the color has enough contrast as well. We found that this was really annoying people, so we ended up also giving you the option to press Control to get rid of that pop-up window. So that way you're actually not seeing it anymore. And we also gave you the option to press Command, to press something else, to actually make sure that it actually stays. Because we had a lot of people that are screen zoom modifier users. They see the screen at like 500%. And by the time they move to this next thing, the info bar was gone again. So you can actually make it by pressing the button down at the same time. You can lock it, and it will actually not move out anymore. So that was an accessibility bit that we helped you with here as well. So this is a great way just to inspect what's going on in your page. But you can also interact with the page in any way. You can actually just go in here and delete, for example, the gallery, which is not visible here, so that would be pointless. So you can delete that talk here and actually get rid of it. So I can edit the whole page before I take a screenshot to get rid of all the stuff that I don't want to print out, or a print version as well. You can also, if you go to any node, you can right click it and do attribute changing, edit as HTML, duplicate the element, put it in there. You can also force the state of the element to hover and these kind of things. I'm going to show you that in a second as well. And you can set breakpoints. So basically, if any of these elements change, you can go into the debugger and have a breakpoint here where you find out something has been loaded in here. So again, you don't need to do a console log, and you don't have to have access into it. You can focus into it, you can scroll into view, and you can actually take a screenshot of it as well, which is really, really useful, which is not an option. Capture node screenshot here as well. Now, this is an interesting one because it just does now a screenshot of that one node. You probably have seen Netflix, Disney Plus, and the other things, and that you can watch videos there. Have you ever tried to do a screenshot of any of those? You can't. It actually, the operating system, both Windows and macOS, doesn't allow you to take screenshots of streaming media content that has been copyright material in it, because you could take a screenshot of each frame and then stitch the movie together, or I don't know why it's there. For now, if you pause a video in Disney Plus or something and you use that note screenshot on the video element, you can take screenshots of the Disney movies. So if you want to create the video by taking a picture of each frame, you can do that now. It's probably a bug. We probably shouldn't be doing that, and I probably shouldn't have told you that, but it's something that you can use right now, and it's an interesting bit to have in there. What I also find about the Elements tool interesting is often that you have things that actually say, wait 15 seconds before you can download something. Just look in the Elements for disabled, click on that element and remove that disabled, and you're going to be able to click that button without waiting the 5 minutes for the download. That's another thing that can be done, which probably shouldn't have told you either. But it's something that is just there. So the developer tools are actually, and I'm working on a video course on that, to basically allow you to mess with the web in any which way you want. And it's really, really cool to have that. That's why a lot of people are wondering, what can we do to stop people from opening the developer tools? One of my favorite things I've seen is a window onload debugger statement. You can write a debugger statement anywhere in your JavaScript, and that actually starts the debugger of the browser and stops the execution of the page. And people do that in an endless this loop to actually stop you from using developer tools. If that happens to you, right-click that debugger statement and say never break here, and then it's working again. It's an arms race, and they're losing. So the sources tool is even more interesting. So in the sources tool, I get access to all the sources of the document. So in this case, I am here at overrides where I want to be is at file system. So need more space here. Okay. Not file system. What am I talking about? I want to have page. So now here's all the documents that are actually making up this website, and this is my local. This is the cached copy right now that's on my machine. So when I want to do a more complex style rather than changing the styles in the elements tool, I can actually write the styles in here as well. So oftentimes when I build this website right now, I actually don't do the changes here and then build the website and hope I find it, but I do an image a change here where I can say okay, let's do 50% of the image, and then I just copy and paste the whole CSS in here, and then you can see that now the QR code is not the full screen anymore, but it's 50%. So this is a great way to test out things because you can override any of the files in there in the document that you have, and you have a full text, full editor in there as well. If you have a secondary monitor like I have at home, it's actually a really cool thing just to build your website as well. You can actually build it directly in the developer tools in the sources tool. You can also do it with the HTML, and you can do it with all the bits that get generated by the static generator here. And you can see the images that have been loaded. Why there's only one of them right now is interesting, but we'll see about that later. And you can see once I do a change here, you'll see that little asterisk next to it, and that means that file has been changed, and it's not the one that actually came from the server. The problem with any of that is if you reload it, all your changes are gone again because it overwrites the one with coming from the server, and you don't see on any of the changes that you've done here. But there's ways around that. First, another thing I wanted to show you is log points as well. So you see console log is a super exciting thing, but you always have to go to your source code and write console log somewhere. You can also go anywhere in a third-party JavaScript and set a log point. So I can basically go into my index.html here, and if I find something here, okay, that's the output. That's not really doing any interaction, but let's try it. I can actually, I can do that. I can add a log point here. And in the log point, I can just say console log, I don't know, window inner HTML, whatever I want to show here. Window inner width, not HTML. Window doesn't have any HTML. And when I set that log point right now, and I go back to my console, and I interact with the page and do something, it should actually log it, which of course it doesn't right now. Oh, how about that? No? How about that? Yeah. So that's on the load here. So this 890 is a log that I have added to that third-party site without having access to that source code. So this is a really good way to debug something that you cannot change, or a legacy system that is built by 6,000 JavaScript bundles. So you can right-click anywhere and do a console log point to get access to the state inside that function. That also works around issues when you have, for example, no access to it because there's no global method or there's no global variables, but you can just log the internal of that function that way as well. So log points are a really simple way to get started and get more insight into what's going on there. Overrides are another interesting bit where we can actually just say, never ever load it from the server. So we go back to sources here, and you can say, okay, I'm tired of these changes in CSS. So I can say, okay, I want an override folder here as well. And then you basically define a folder on your hard drive, and you can say let's create a new one here. OV, select this one, and then I can go to any of the pages, any of the files in the page, and I can say right-click, and I can say, I could say put it into overrides. What do I do here? Learn more. Bum bum bum. Oh yeah, top. Yeah, right. You're right. Of course, I wasn't allowed to do that. But if I have it now, I can actually right-click it and save it into overrides. Save for overrides. And that would now, and you can see at that icon again that something changed. And now it's actually in my overrides folder on my document, on my computer. So if I go to the downloads here and I go to the overrides folder, I have CodePoet, GitHub, the more developer tools, assets, styles, CSS. So any change that I do on that thing right now will be loaded when the page changes. And we can try that out. So let's try with Visual Studio Code and do something stupid. Say like padding 55 EM. On the body, and we save that. And you can see now already that the change happened here. And this is now permanent. So if I reload the page and get it from the server, it never loads the file from GitHub, but it actually uses my local override of that file. So what can I do with that? I can get rid of super annoying pop-up scripts. I can get rid of scripts that need to be generated. So when we talked to the Office team, for example, they had a 12 megabyte JavaScript file that was generated from like 50 different includes that took about 10 minutes to build. So they're using overrides to actually use the bundle, the generated JavaScript, and debug that bundle and do changes in there before they're actually going back to doing the live changes and have to wait 10 minutes for their bundle to change every single time. So overrides are a very, very interesting way to make sure that the data that doesn't come from the server anymore, but gets overridden by the one that is on your hard drive. And that way you can access things that, again, you shouldn't access, but it actually is much better than getting 10,000 pop-up windows that you don't want to have. Snippets are of course one of my favorite things ever. In the snippets, in the sources panel, you have snippets, and there you can just create snippets that actually you want to access against a website. So you write something that I showed you earlier, like get me all the links or get me all the text of the links, copy them somewhere else, and you create a snippet out of it, and then you can run that against the website. Some of you might remember Grease Monkey used to be an extension for Firefox that actually allowed you to run scripts on any website. This is part of this. So what I'm doing with that a lot is like internal products that are horrible to use, like have no keyboard interaction or something. I add keyboard interaction to them, and I run the snippet when I open the page just with the command palette and say like run my snippet now, and it injects the keyboard access to a tool that doesn't have keyboard access. I can mess around in any which way with the web with snippets. One thing that annoys me about snippets to no end is that they're not on the file system. They're actually part of the preferences JSON file, which is somewhere deep down in your hard drive, and you never find it if you're not a user that actually builds the browser. So you cannot share them. So one of the things that I want to have is have a snippet editor that actually allows me to share snippets on Dropbox with other people or with a symlink to the preferences file and generate them from them. Because I think messing with the web with scripts is a really, really good thing to have, and it's scaring a lot of people because they don't know what it is. But the snippets editor would allow you to actually store functionality that you normally do in the console that becomes more complex, that you can then copy and paste in there and create snippets from it. Now, one of the biggest problems I see with the developer tools all up is if I have these really, really cool tools here to do graphical things. So in this case, I've got my navigation here, and it's basically a flex navigation. And CSS Flexbox is not that obvious for many people that actually haven't been using it for a while. So we made it easier for you by giving you some extra information here. So why does that not work? Cool. I think we have Flex here as well. Anyways, okay. You already see that the styles.css is again overwritten here. So this is coming now from my hard drive and not from the live server any longer. That might be an issue. And if I have a Flexbox here, I can actually click that button and I can change the flex direction. I can make it wrap. I can do align content. I can justify the content, and I can do all kind of changes to see the differences when I'm doing here. So in this case, I have the no wrap, then the thing comes up here. I actually have the direction row reverse where I can change the things around, and I get a visual change for that, and it generates the CSS exactly for me in that file as well. The problem is, again, if I don't use the override that I did here and I reload it, the thing would be gone. So let's get rid of that override because that's actually in the way of my explanations here right now. So if you have overrides running and you basically want to get rid of them, you can either just turn them off or you can just delete them. So if I now reload that, any of the changes that I've done before are not here anymore because as the styles get loaded from GitHub again and not from my local machine. If I now do any of these flex changes here as well that I've done before, and I do all kind of really cool things with the color picker as well. So I can go to the body here and say like, this color is rubbish. I want to have a red because that's unreadable. That's so much cooler because I'm on the edge here. And I do these things and I reload the page, it's all gone again because I'm not changing a file. I'm changing basically just the display in my browser right now. And this is kind of wasteful, I think. We put all these really cool tools in there to allow you to do all kind of graphical things. And once the changes are done, you have to go back to your editor and copy and paste the changes back. And if you do more than one change, where was the change? What have I done to achieve this? How did I do it? One tool that is completely unknown is the Changes tool. There's a Changes tool in the developer tools of everything that you've done, every file that you changed, and you have a diff of like what was deleted and what was added. That's all the functionality it has. Somebody wrote that probably in a hackathon years ago and put it in there, but I cannot do anything clever like only give me the changes or only do things. The right click says empty and that's about it. So the Changes tool is really cool to get an overview of what happened, but it's not really doing a diff like you would expect on GitHub or you would expect in Visual Studio Code to allow you to see these changes directly there. Which brings me to making local changes. So if you go, almost out of time, oh crap, okay. If you open a local server, it asks you like, hey, do you have Visual Studio Code installed? Do you want to edit in Visual Studio Code? Edit in Visual Studio Code. That's what that one does, so you can read that one up. You can also have workspaces that allow you to actually change these things, much like the overrides there are for different parts of your hard drive. You have these developer tools for non-developers that I talked about. That's called cheat codes for the web. You can try that one out. And that one, I will explain people, for example, how to inspect the unexpectable using an inspector that I said before, how to download all the images that are in a page, how to get a simpler video player. Yeah, you got these really annoying video players with pop-ups. You can actually go to the network, find the video file, right-click that one, and just get the different viewer in there. So I think the developer tools are much more than just developers out there. So. And I'm getting really fast in that, okay. Devtools for Visual Studio Code is something that I normally give a talk about. This is what that one does. I'm a Visual Studio Code, and I told you just right now that it's super annoying if I do changes that they're not actually being reflected in my source code. This one does that. I can go right click, open with Edge, open a browser. You get a browser directly in Visual Studio Code. And that browser has all the views that I showed you before, like all the simulation stuff in there. You can simulate dark mode, light mode. You can simulate different color deficiencies and accessibility testing stuff. But most important, you can also use the developer tools inside your editor right now here. And if you do any change in a CSS here, it doesn't only change it in the developer tools, but you can see up there that it also changes it in my source code. So none of the changes that you do in the developer tools are lost any longer. That changes tool is not necessary because you have a dedicated browser with dedicated developer tools inside your Visual Studio Code instance, because Visual Studio Code is written on Chromium as well. That's why we're able to integrate it that way. That also works with SAS and with other, if your conversion creates a source map, we can actually follow that source map as well and change your SAS files from the CSS editor. This also does live analysis, so if you basically do something in your HTML that's not right, so in this case I forget, for example, to put a language in here, then you get a squiggly underline, and the squiggly underline tells you the HTML element needs to have a language attribute, and you can say, I want a quick fix, I never want you to tell me that again, or I want you to do the fix for me. In this case, for example, if I don't define a char set, I actually say, okay, the char set hasn't been defined. I say quick fix. I go to that light bulb. I say fix the meta char set, and it creates that char set element for me. So your code gets validated while you write it, and errors that you make are actually shown to you while you do them, and any of the live changes will be shown in your editor. Devtools for DevTools, super geeky, super stupid little thing, but you can try it out yourself. So if you undock the DevTools in an own window, and you go back to the DevTools in that window, you can do Command-Shift-I, and that opens developer tools for developer tools. And then you can inspect the developer tools themselves and see how we've written the developer tools. You can also open that on the developer tools, if you're really bored. But this just shows you that what we're doing here is cooking with water, and we're basically just building things using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and not just some magical language that we made up ourselves. You can contribute to Devtools by going to GitHub. There are actually the developer tools have a GitHub repo where we welcome pull requests, push requests, things and whatever. And here's all the resources that I talked about here, the official documentation, devtoolstip.org, Can I Devtools, the Visual Studio Code extension that I showed you. What's That Tool is a game where you can actually see if you know any of those. And one thing I've published just lately is Dear Console, which says like, okay, give me for the file names of all the images in the document without the rest of the URL. So you can just copy that and you could just paste it into the console if you wanted to, or create a snippet from it. And that would show you that. There's no images in that one, so that's kind of pointless. But if I showed that here, it would show me the images that are in the document. And I've overwritten that one. Hang on. I do that again. Give me all the images, copy that one, and put that here. And then you, again, get the images of the image names that you want to have. So this is a collection of just little snippets that you can do in the console. If you click on them, you get the source code here. You can copy the source code directly with these buttons here. So if you want to start playing with the console, that's it. I'm out of time. I'm completely random. I'm sorry about that, but I hope you had some fun. You probably learned something. I'm here until, at 2 o'clock I gotta go for an interview, but then I actually, in between, I'm here for you to have any more questions about console, developer tools, and anything in between. I don't care which browser you use. Most of the stuff that I showed is available in all of them. So go and play with the web, and don't think that just because somebody says you cannot reach it, you will be able to reach it using developer tools. Thank you.